So, during Alabama's primary races for U.S. Senate, the state was introduced to Mary Maxwell.
Mary Maxwell here, running for Congress.
Mary Maxwell was an odd candidate. Many voters could be forgiven for thinking she had never heard a conspiracy theory she didn't believe.
I have this little badge here, but I'm not a badge wearer. It says, "The official story of 9/11 is a big lie." Well, I'm not a badge wearer.
But even stranger was that this woman with a Boston accent who lives in Australia and had never stepped foot in Alabama before was qualified to run for U.S. Senate in Alabama. How is that possible? If you look at the Alabama Secretary of State's website, you'll see a list of residency requirements for public office. Want to be governor? You need to have lived in Alabama for 7 years. State representative requires you to be a resident of the state for at least 3 years and your particular district for 1 year. But next to U.S. Senator and U.S. Representative, just 1 day. But that isn't some weird quirk of Alabama, it's federal law. The reason why goes back to the mid-90s. See, over the centuries, a lot of states had passed laws that limited the amount of times a person could run for Congress for that state. But when Arkansas passed a similar law, sitting Arkansas Congressman Ray Thornton decided to fight it in court. In 1995, the case landed in the U.S. Supreme Court as U.S. Term Limits Incorporated versus Thornton. In a split vote, the court ultimately sided with Congressman Thornton. The court ruled that the qualifications to run for U.S. Congress were laid out in the U.S. Constitution, and states weren't allowed to amend or add on to those qualifications. Now, while the case was about knocking down state-imposed term limits on congressmen, it had the additional consequence of eliminating any requirements on residency for those positions. According to the U.S. Constitution, if you want to be a senator from a state, you just need to be an inhabitant of that state on the day you are elected. You don't need to be a legal resident before Election Day, and what qualifies as an inhabitant is pretty vague. As long as you rent an apartment in that state and maybe get a P.O. box before Election Day, you can probably meet the requirements to be an inhabitant. But that's just on Election Day. You don't have to be a resident at all to qualify to run for Congress in any state. So you could just run wherever you want, and if it looks like you might win, move there before the general election. So that's how we ended up with a character like Mary Maxwell in the Alabama Senate race. Now, if we wanted to go back and allow residency requirements for Congress, we could, but it would require an amendment to the Constitution, and if you look around right now, you may notice that isn't exactly going to get high priority. But on the upside, if this whole Reckon thing doesn't work out, maybe I can throw my hat in for a congressional seat in Hawaii next year. I'm Jonathan Soboleski for Congress. Aloha. If you like these videos, you can go to the Reckon by AL.com Facebook page where you can find a lot of videos and stories on history and news. Be sure to like the page before all our likes get used up. It helps us share these videos with even more people. Thanks.